You're watching LMCC.
Hello, everybody. I'm Patty Peterson. We have a very special guest for you today. His name is George Myers. And little do you know, some of you watching this show, that there was not only a happening nightclub out in the Minnetonka area, but a wonderful musician who spent his time there and in Minnetonka. And George, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us here.
Thank you. Pleasure.
All right. So I want to talk a little bit about your history and learn about what influenced you as a musician. You're a trombonist, right?
Right.
Okay. So what I like to start with is, what was it like growing up in your household? Did you have people who played instruments? Did your parents play music on phonograph music, or what was it like in your environment growing up?
There wasn't much, and I grew up out on Lake Minnetonka when it wasn't the play like it was now. It was a summer destination, and there wasn't a lot to do because there was only people there in the summertime. And so I started playing trombone, and I was at Mound High School at the time, and the band teacher was not a trombone player, he was a clarinetist. And at that time they built Orono, and we were the third class in Orono. Okay. And they hired a guy by the name of Warren Alm, who was a terrific trombone player. And he taught me artificial positions and all the things that trombone players know. And that really got me going. And so I had a lot of time to practice and so forth. And I fell in love with playing trombone. And I used to play Amsden duets with a trumpet player in school. And so, it was plenty fast. I played Mendelssohn's Concerto for violin on trombone for the high school, get together and all that sort of thing. And the state, we went down to the university for the state things and that sort of thing. So that's kind of where I got. And at that time, jazz was big.
Yeah.
Big bands. We had a chance in high school. We'd go to Prom Ballroom and stand on the rail and watch all the big bands that came to town.
Right.
Chet Groth had a rehearsal studio on the second floor of his store. And you could go in there as a young guy and sit next to people that could play. For instance, Leo Fine, I think, was playing with Tommy Dorsey at the time. And he'd come down to that thing, and trumpet players could sit next to him. And that's when you learn, you can really learn.
Right. This is a story I've never heard before. So that's very interesting for me to hear that. And yeah, you were at the hip or the elbow of someone who was already pounding the pavement in a field that you probably wanted to get into. So what age were you when you started playing trombone, and where did it go from there?
Oh, I guess I was probably 12 or 14, something like that, when I started. And I, as I said, there wasn't a lot to do, so I was able to practice a lot. And you put some records on in your bedroom and play along with them and think you're on the bandstand with the big people, and it was great. There were some great musicians, in Minneapolis at the time.
Yes.
Dave Frischberg, Don Ellis. And I had the opportunity to go play a rehearsal with them, and that just turned my mind around. And then you have the Peterson family, which you're a part of, and the Hewarts, and Ted Hewart. And so there was a lot of good music. And I don't know what the kids are doing today. It's a shame, really.
Well, what's interesting is there's still enough jazz out there and interest in the big band scene and expression through jazz that you'd be nicely surprised, I'm happy to say. It isn't at the forefront, unfortunately, so we don't hear that much about it, but it's still happening. And I know that Dean Sorensen He's the professor at the University of Minnesota, and he has the big band jazz ensembles, jazz studies, and the Petersons have created a scholarship there for kids who are learning jazz, just to help them along with their education. So it is still happening. I can attest to that. Let's talk a little bit about in your youth. You mentioned the prom ballroom. Was that an age 21 and up, or could all ages go in and see the different touring musicians?
You could go in there, you just couldn't drink.
Yes.
Which I didn't care about anyway. We were just kids in high school. And of course, the Marigold Ballroom was going on at the time too,
Sure.
which Big Stoop Chamberlain had a band there and so forth. And then when I was in high school, there was a Larry Elliott had a traveling band, and we'd go out of town on Friday and Saturday and come back on Sunday. And he played those ballrooms out in the country. It was modern and old time, or whatever you want to call it. But I was making $12, $12.50 a shot at in those days. And the kids, they'd set pins at the bowling alley for weeks to try to make that much, so.
My goodness. So you became a touring musician at a very young age.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then after I joined the service, took the horn with me, and I didn't play in a band in the service. I was in radar, but I took the horn with me, and I played over in England in churches when we were over there, and I played in Montreal in clubs and hotels up there. I mean, it's just a terrific thing, the music thing, and you can do anything if you can play, I think.
I'm interviewing George Myers here, who was resident of Minnetonka, and now you're in Arizona, but a musician by trade who was a touring musician at a young age. And so just reintroducing who you are for those people who are just joining us right now. So when you were touring in the armed services, did you sit in with bands that were in the different hotels and clubs? Is that what you were just talking about?
Well, I was at an air base up in Plattsburgh, New York, SAC base. And so I could drive over the border into Montreal, and at the end of Lake Champlain, there was a hotel, and I got in with the guys there, and they gave me $25 a weekend, plus gave me my room and board and so forth. So I made more money on the weekends playing up there than I did in the service,
My gosh. Oh, so you were hooked. You were hooked. Yeah. And you were in the service until the late 50s, if I remember right.
58,
And then what did you do? Did you come back to the Twin Cities?
Yeah, I came back home, and somehow Dick Brusick, who owned the Downbeat, got my name. And I went over there and started playing with them. Bill Boone was playing sax, Joe Broadfoot was playing piano, and Dave Faison on bass, and Dick on drums. And it was basically a blues band. That's all it was.
It wasn't jazz.
And so, yeah, we just played pretty much some blues and some things. So then I talked to Dick, and I wrote a book for true trombones, because Kay Winding and J.J. Johnson were big at the time. And so Byron Snow from Orono and myself, we started playing the two trombone thing, jazz. And then we went to four trombones, and that's when Lake Cammon came out and did the broadcasting.
That had to be so great. And so you were aired live, weren't you?
Yeah, when Cammon came out. And then after that, Tom Talbert came back to town, and he had a band, 12-piece band that he wrote for. He didn't play much, but he liked to write, and he wrote this book for 12-piece. And I thought it was great because it was four sax, two trumpets, two trombones, and a French horn and a rhythm section. And you could get all kinds of neat sounds with that. And so I started doing my own writing with that instrumentation. And that's what ended up the Downbeat Band.
You're walking along the street, or you're at a party, or else you're alone, and then you suddenly dig. You're looking in someone's eyes, you realize.
And Dick Brusick, I can't say enough for him. he supported us. I played out there 3 nights a week, and he just kept the jazz, and we could play all kinds of fast stuff and go off and on all solos and all kinds of stuff, you know. So it was great.
Where was the Downbeat located?
Right in the middle of Spring Park. They call it Skunk Hollow.
Okay.
And then next to us was an old bar called Don and Babes. And next to that was the Lakeview. And Dick and Don Ma had that Lakeview in those days. And they had,
Right.
God, they had the Basie Band in there. They had Dave Brubeck. They had all kinds of big names that came in there. So we could slide next door and see those guys, you know. I mean,
So
it was really a jazz
had to
spot.
be fun.
Yeah,
Wow.
oh God, yeah. Yeah.
All in that area, you had that much music going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so great. So I hear tell that there was some that Woody Herman was playing. Do you have a story about Woody Herman?
Well, he came to the Downbeat, and at that time, I was playing, you know, gigs around there and in Minneapolis. But my dad, I was in the X-ray business, and I had electronic training, and I was working for my dad. So Woody came to town, and a guy was leaving that played the second jazz chair, and so they'd asked me if I wanted to sit in and play. So I'll never forget it. I mean, I got up there and we sight read Golden Wedding or something, which is really upbeat. And there's a big, long trombone solo in it. And when Woody wants you to keep going, he just keeps waving his hand. And if you play a wind instrument, you know, when your mouth starts drying out, it's murder, because you got to have spit to play. And I thought I was going to die before it was over with, but I went on the road with him for a little while. And then wasn't very long, but my parents asked me to come back because my dad wasn't doing well and so forth. And I came back to the business. So, and I think at the time, Woody was going to kind of bail out for a while. So, but it was a great experience. And man, when you play every night and you play those charts, you really get some good chops, you know. So, but I was
of course
on the Downbeat Band. I had great musicians we had great musicians in the Minneapolis area. I don't think people knew a lot about it because, you know, to make some money, they go play the country club scene and so forth. But when they came out there on Sunday night, I mean, we played some really up-tempo stuff and they were able to stretch out, you know.
So you're talking about these rooms were listening rooms. They weren't dance halls. Is that right?
I'm not sure I understand.
Well, were they supper clubs where there was jazz? What was the environment like? Because sometimes
At the Downbeat?
Yeah, the Downbeat.
You mean at the Downbeat?
A listening room?
No, it was huge. And it was just a setup deal. And so
Okay.
people would dance. We'd play
You played
some dance
dances.
stuff.
Okay.
Yeah. But we didn't play for the dancers because Dick would say, you know, get them off the floor. He wanted them drinking more. So away we'd go, you know, with
Right.
Sister Sadie or something like that, you know. I mean, and the guys loved it. And Don Rustad was one of them. He played lead alto. And then we had Bob Crea and we had Hagasag. I never had the trombone player out there, but I had Dentley playing. And Percy Hughes even sat in with us, played baritone.
Oh my
You know,
God.
yeah.
Right.
But it was Sunday nights. You remember? You're too young. You don't remember. But there was no booze in Minneapolis at that time, really. And so these guys, if they were working, like John Fisker played bass, but he worked at the Flame Room, you know, at the Radisson, and it was closed Sunday night. So he'd love to come out there and just wail, you know.
Well, I had heard about it for absolutely years. It was a big name, big deal to the Downbeat in itself. So how long did you do that? How long were you there?
He closed up. It must have been in early 70s.
So over 10 years?
Oh, yeah, at least.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And then Dick, you know, he had that place and then he owned the liquor store up on the corner. So he did all right. But I don't remember what transpired, but it just went downhill. So that was the end of it, you know.
That's too bad. Well, then when that was done, you must have continued playing trombone and you had all these great charts. Did you take your music elsewhere?
No, we really didn't. We played some of the union things, you know, but I was starting a business. My dad had finally gotten out of it, and I started my own X-ray business, and I didn't have any money. So Tom Mustachio and Fisker and I and Russ Dad and Bob Peck, we played at the Roaring Twenties for the strippers. That was a job you could get, you know.
Yes, I've heard a lot of stories like that, to be honest with you. And
Sure.
that sometimes the bands would be playing for them or they'd be playing a show in between their shows.
We did that too.
Yeah, yeah.
We did a bunch of charts on we did a bunch of charts on West Side Story, and Rusty played vibes and saxophone and flute and whatever.
I didn't know he
And so-
played vibes. Wow, okay.
Yeah, and Tom Mustachio, I think he ended up out at the Chanhassen Dinner Theater.
Okay, so what was he, just like a pit musician then?
Out there,
Somebody
he's
in
the
our
director.
orchestra?
I played out there for a show called The Boyfriend, and Arnie Ness was leading that up. And that's when he stuck his head up through the hole in the stage, you know, and then he would direct, because we were underneath the stage playing. So we didn't have to put on any fancy clothes or anything. We just go in jeans and play the show, you know.
Oh, how fun. You've had a wonderful career, both in your X-ray business and musically as well. What's the biggest high point for you when you think about it?
Playing with Woody. Absolutely.
Playing with Woody. Okay.
Yeah. When I was a kid, I saw him down at the prom ballroom. I was high school. And I'll never forget, he had two trombone players on the thing, and Carl Fontana was playing jazz in the second chair, and nobody has ever since or played trombone like him. And that dropped my jaw, because he did things on trombone that you can't do. And I worked to try to play like him. And after I got off the road with Woody and went back home business, I'd go out to Vegas, and some of the guys had settled out there, and we still brought up, Carl was out there at the time. I mean, it was amazing. That's when you really get into it, because these guys are really good musicians, you know. And you know,
and you are too. Now, were you part of any recording projects, George?
I wasn't.
Okay.
But I had Bruce Paulson played the other trombone on the band at the Downbeat, and he ended up on the Tonight Show.
Yes.
And I think Tom was on that Tonight Show too, wasn't he?
He was on there. He was a sub, but ended up being on the bandstand so many times. And he and Lila are still out there, and he's working as much as he possibly can. So fun to hear from him. And Bruce got married and moved to, I think it was New Zealand.
Yeah, his doctor was a radiologist in St. Paul.
Oh my goodness, I'll be darned.
Yeah.
So how about something else I like to find out is sometimes there are challenges in the music industry. What do you suppose a challenge was that you faced, especially when you were trying to get the musicians and work at the Downbeat and do these gigs? Did you have anything that stands out that maybe was a real tough time for you?
I think it was a lot easier for me than a lot of people, because when I hooked up with Bruce, he gave me free rein, you know, to do a lot of things, and it allowed me to start writing. And that was a real love, to write arrangements. I just had a little electric piano at the time, and to write arrangements for the band and see how they come out. And then to be able to get the talent that was in Minneapolis out there at the time and put it together in this band, that was a highlight of everything. I mean, so I never really had any tough times. Music was always a real stepping stone for me, and it allowed me to do things I never would have been able to do otherwise.
Can you give me an example?
Well, it just opened so many doors.
Yeah.
I mean, and you meet interesting people, and there's nobody more interesting than musicians. You know, they got stories that'll roll your shirt up your back, you know. But
Yes. And always a joke or two, I've noticed from being the singer on the bandstand. It's pretty fun stuff.
you know, as you get older though, and I'm really old. I'm 85, so, and I've got a Yamaha Genesis now, which has got all the sounds on it, you know, and so forth, and a 16-track sequencer, a Tascam. And so I can play around and make my own little CDs and this sort of thing. They're not great, but it still keeps my mind going. And that's the biggest thing when you get old, keep your body and your mind going if you can. And
that's wonderful advice. So George, I want to ask you one thing, because this is something I like to get from a person who has played music like you have, and you had great success. And I always like, in the beginning of our conversation, some up and coming jazz musicians who are really wanting to get into this business. Do you have any advice for them?
Just go and try to play as much as you can. God, when I was a kid in training down in Biloxi Air Base, I'd go into Biloxi and just sit in with any band that would let me. I sat in with Gus Stevens down on the shore and everything, and that's the way you learn, is by sitting in and playing a bunch of different keys, play a bunch of tunes you don't even know hardly, and it's all experience, you know. And that's the most important thing to try to get. And I find that I don't know how these young people can get experience like that anymore, because there was so much jazz going on at the time, and it was accepted, you know, much more than it is today.
It is. It was the popular music, though, at the time. I know rock and roll was coming in, but I believe, if I talk about it, like the Great American Songbook, which my folks played, was the popular music of the time. And so it was accepted. I agree with you totally.
You can't beat the old standards. I mean, I got tons of fake books here, and I go through the old standards, and the words are good, the chords are good, you know, it's not major. And I've bought a fake book for I don't know, rock or whatever you want to call it. Well, it's ridiculous. The chords in there, the chords go on, same chord goes on for 8 bars, you know.
Well, yes, it has changed. That's more, you know, I think of the folk music that really has changed. What you and I would call a verse for a Great American Songbook is not what a verse is in that kind of music. It's totally different. And you have to, like, the verse in the Great American Songbook sets up the whole story of a lyric at the beginning of it. So I know that era only because I lived it under my parents as well, Willie and Jeannie. So I love that we can talk here today. And do you get out and hear music where you're living now? Is there some good jazz in Arizona?
There probably is further up, but I'm way on the south end, and I don't get up there too much. There was some big band stuff that I saw. We used to rent up in Scottsdale, and there's more going on up there than there is down where I'm at. So I don't. They have some entertainment that comes into the place where I live here, but it's phony stuff. I mean, you know, I don't go to much of it. Now, some of them.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, they try to mimic somebody else. It's what do you call it? Not imposters, but you know, a tribute,
a show like a Frank Sinatra sound alike. Right, exactly.
Yeah.
The tribute shows are popular here right now too.
Yeah. But other than that, I'm content to play golf 4 days a week and play my piano. That's good.
So are you not pulling out your trombone anymore?
Nope, don't play it.
Okay.
You know, I just feel that unless you're going to practice and you're going to play it routinely, you're not going to play it, and you're never going to play it as good as you did. So it just makes you feel bad. And so I refuse. I won't play that anymore. I have a friend down here, claims he was a saxophone player, and he got it out the other day. And I said, Bill, don't play your saxophone anymore. I mean,
My
it's
husband-
terrible.
My husband is a drummer. I met him on a job. His dad was Mel Pastor, and my husband now calls himself a drum owner. Not
Yeah.
a drummer.
I love it.
Yeah.
Oh,
His name is Stuart.
yeah.
So anyway, well, how fun for us to have this connection and this conversation, and all of the stories of the Downbeat and all of the bands that you were able to bring together. And what a highlight for me to be able to get to know you. And I look forward to speaking to you again.
That's very nice of you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you. It's nice meeting you too.
Nice to meet you too, especially since you know a few members of my family.
I sure do.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's very, very fun. Well, you take care, and thank you for joining us here today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. George Myers, everybody. I'm Patty Peterson, signing off.